Welcome to Presume Technologies. I am Venkat. This is part 6 of ASP.NET MVC tutorial. In this video, we'll discuss ViewData and ViewBag in MVC. Please watch part 5 of this video series before proceeding with this video because we'll be working with the example that we discussed in part 5. Now, both ViewData and ViewBag are used to pass data from a controller to a view. In fact, if you remember in part 5, we actually used this ViewBag object to store the list of countries within this dynamic property countries, and we are doing that within this controller action method. And look at what we are doing in the view. We're using the ViewBag objects countries property to pull the countries that we have stored and then print them. So basically we're using this ViewBag object to pass data from this controller to this view. Okay, but remember this ViewBag object uses the dynamic feature that was introduced in C# 4.0. So this dynamic feature allows an object to have properties dynamically added to it. What do we mean by that? Look at this property here, countries. This is a dynamic property, meaning this property is defined on the fly. Okay, so you can give any property name that's meaningful here. Okay, I just happen to choose countries, but you can give it something like countries list, something like that if you want. So this is a dynamic property, and the downside of these dynamic properties is that they don't provide compile time error checking. Meaning, let's say for example, if I specify countries list here, then when I am retrieving them, I have to use the same property. If you misspell that, for example, here I am using countries list, but here I am saying just countries, and if I run this, what's going to happen? As you might expect, we get a null reference exception. And why is that? Because look at this, we are trying to retrieve something out of this countries property while there is nothing in that property. Okay, look at this, when I actually build this, I don't get any compiler error. Look at on the status bar, it says build succeeded. So I will not know about the compile time errors. But then when I actually run the application, look at what's going to happen. In countries property, the dynamic property of this ViewBag object, there's nothing. So that's why I get a null reference exception when I try to convert that into a string. Okay, so this ViewBag object, it doesn't provide any compile time error checking. What's about ViewData? Now look at this. This is how we use ViewBag object. ViewBag dot, and then you give a dynamic property name, and then in that property you assign some data. But whereas if you want to use ViewData, you don't use properties, dynamic properties like this. Instead you use string keys. Okay, so you use a square bracket there, and then you specify your key name. Now if you look at the syntax, it's very much similar to that of a view state, session state, or application state. We discussed about view state, session state, application state in ASP.NET video tutorial, so if you're new to them, please watch those videos there. But the syntax here of using ViewData is very much similar to them. Okay, again I can use this ViewData to actually pass data from a controller to a view. Let's quickly look at an example. Now let's say instead of using ViewBag, I want to use ViewData. So ViewData, and then I can use the square bracket there, define our key. So I'm going to call this key countries. You can give it any meaningful key that you want. Okay, and then to retrieve the data out of it within the view, you use the same key there. So ViewBag, ViewData of countries. But then if you look at what is the return type of this, you can store anything into ViewData, just like a view state or session state or application state. You can store anything and everything into this ViewData object. So that's why the return type is object, but we know what we are expecting back. We are expecting a list of string back, so that's what is the type I want to cast it to by using this typecast operator. So if I run this now, as you might expect, it's going to work in the same way. Here, instead of using ViewBag, we are actually using ViewData. Okay, so obviously when this form renders, we should have the list of countries printed. Okay, so both ViewData and ViewBag does not provide compile time error checking. For example, if you misspell keysar property name, so if in case of ViewData, if I misspell the key name, look at that, instead of using ViewData of countries, if I misspell it, ViewData of countries 1, what do you think is going to happen? We get again a null reference exception. Okay, so at compile time, this ViewData and ViewBag, they don't report any errors. Okay, we only get to know about those errors at runtime, which is dangerous. Just imagine what's going to happen if we didn't detect those errors at testing, during testing, and then we deploy our application to production servers, end users start using them, and then if we have these runtime errors, it doesn't look that great. Okay, so that's why anytime we want to pass data from a controller to a view, it's always a good practice to use strongly typed view models. We'll learn more about strongly typed view models in a later video session. But understand, it's possible to pass data using, from a controller to a view using ViewData and ViewBag, but in reality, we don't, it's not a good practice to use them for that purpose. Alright, and internally the ViewBag properties are actually stored as name value pairs in the ViewData dictionary. Okay, so here ViewData uses keys and ViewBag uses properties, but these properties internally, they are stored as name value pairs. Alright, on this slide you can find resources for ASP.NET C# and SQL Server interview questions. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.